Hello. So I want to be consistent and continue with my Prime Minister series. But before I do that, I want to say a quick word about Lord Healy, Dennis Healy. He is a former Labour Chancellor, served between 1976 and 1979 in the Callaghan administration, and he previously served as a Defence Secretary, I believe, between 64 and 70 under the Wilson administration. Um, he was 98 years old and he's passed away today. Certainly ripe old age there, 98, and very few people make it that long. So I believe he must be one of our longest serving individuals to be in the great offices of state. Although I believe in the former minister Emmanuel Shimwell lived to about 101, but certainly Dennis Healy. I mean, 98 is a very long innings to use a cricket term. Um, I won't say very much, but it's my understanding that he served at the Normandy landings. So he's one of the last generation of political leaders who actually saw service in World War II. He was on the beaches at Normandy. So this man was a war hero, a statesman. Um, he went through a period in the 70s where Labour was in a very bitter sort of phase of divisions. Something the Labour Party seems to be very used to, but he basically was seen as more on the right of the party. Of course, tributes have been flowing in. He was well known for his big bushy eyebrows, very distinctive feature, almost looked like a wise old owl. I remember hearing him speak after the death of Tony Benn last year. But anyway, that's just something I thought worth mentioning. Um, so rest in peace, Dennis Healy. So to get on to the main part of the video, at Prime Minister number 39, Neville Chamberlain. Almost certainly one of our most controversial prime ministers, and someone whose name has unfortunately, at least for him, echoed in history with very negative connotations. I'll give a bit of the biography first and talk a bit about, I'll quote a bit from the Downing Street website. Uh, he was born in 1869 in Birmingham. He was a conservative. This is a quote from Chamberlain, one of his more famous quotes. This is the second time in our history that there has come back from Germany to Downing Street peace with honour. I believe it is peace for our time. Neville Chamberlain was born to a political family, being the youngest son of Joseph Chamberlain, a Victorian cabinet minister. Joseph Chamberlain, incidentally, was one of the major political figures of his day, and the half brother of Austen Chamberlain, a Chancellor of the Exchequer. So the Chamberlains were very much a political family. He was educated at Rugby and Mason College, Birmingham. When he was 21, Chamberlain left for the Bahamas to manage a 20,000 acre estate. I didn't know that. That's one thing I like about this site. Sometimes they talk about things that aren't that well known. The venture eventually failed, but he gained a reputation for being a hands-on manager, taking a strong interest in the day-to-day running of affairs. Um, on his return, he became a leading manufacturer in Birmingham, where he was elected a councillor in 1911 and Lord Mayor in 1915. Then, in 1916, David Lloyd George appointed him Director General of the Department of National Service. Remember, this was a coalition government. But personal bitterness between them led to his resignation within a year. In 1918, Chamberlain was elected Conservative MP for Ladywood, but refused to serve under Lloyd George in coalition government. In 1922, he became Postmaster General under Andrew Bonar Law, where he proved his judgment and ability. He was made Minister of Health within months and under Baldwin, Chancellor of the Exchequer, all in little more than a year. So he was clearly, at this point, a very well-respected figure, very fast-rising. And within 5 years of entering Parliament, that's quite something to be a Chancellor of the Exchequer within just 5 years of entering Parliament. His Local Government Act of 1929 reformed the Poor Law, effectively laying the foundations of the welfare state and reorganising local government finance. In 1931, Ramsay MacDonald made him Chancellor of the National Government, and Stanley Baldwin retained him in turn. During the economic crisis, he achieved his father's protectionist ambitions by passing the Import Duties Bill of 1932. Um, and excuse me, um, sorry, I've lost my place. In May 1937, he succeeded Baldwin as Prime Minister and was elected Conservative leader. War was brewing in Europe and had already exploded in Spain. That's the Spanish Civil War, of course. Chamberlain was unwilling to go down in history as responsible for an inevitable destructive war without doing everything possible to prevent it. Chamberlain, as with many in Europe who witnessed the horrors of the First World War and its aftermath, was dedicated to restoring peace at almost any price. He met German Chancellor Adolf Hitler in Munich in 1938, the result of which was an agreement that Britain and Germany would never again go to war. He declared on his return to the UK, "I believe it is peace in our time." And there's old newsreel footage of that where he was greeted by enthusiastic crowds who, I think at that time it was Croydon Airport, who cheered him the whole way to Downing Street. He was a national hero. He was a peacemaker. This is something that we need to remember. He declared on his return, yeah, however, the success of appeasement was short-lived, as Hitler occupied Prague the following year. The invasion of Poland forced Chamberlain's hand, and he declared war on the 3rd of September 1939. He soon came under attack from all political sides after the disastrous first months of war, when Germany looked set for a rapid victory. Unable to form a national government himself, he resigned in May 1940 after the failure of the British efforts to liberate Norway. Bile cancer struck soon after his resignation, forcing him to leave Winston Churchill's coalition government. On his deathbed, he gathered his strength to whisper, "Approaching dissolution brings relief." Some major acts in his time was the Factories Act of 1937, which limited the hours worked by women and children, the Holiday with Pay Act 1938, the recommendation of a week's paid holiday, which led to expansion of holiday camps, Housing Act of 1938, which was aimed to encourage slum clearance and maintain rent controls. He died in Heckfield in Hampshire in 1940 at the age of, just doing quick math, 71. He was one of our older prime ministers entering Downing Street, I believe, at the age of 68. Um, those acts that I just mentioned are, of course, long overshadowed because Chamberlain will always be associated as the Great Appeaser. Um, he's generally ranked by historians among the lower tier of British prime ministers for the hugely controversial consequences of his appeasement policy. And in 1940, there was a book published under a pseudonym of Cato, but some of the authors included people like Michael Foot, and it basically named and shamed a number of leaders, mostly conservatives, but one or two liberals and Labour figures who were said to have appeased Nazi Germany. And some of them were Neville Chamberlain, Sir John Simon, Sir Samuel Hoare, Ramsay MacDonald, Stanley Baldwin, Lord Halifax, Sir Kingsley Wood, Ernest Brown, David Margosson, Sir Horace Wilson, Sir Thomas Inskip, Leslie Bergen, Earl Stanhope, W.S. Morrison, and Sir Reginald Dorman Smith. Um, Other people who wrote that were thought to be Frank Owen, Peter Hard, who was actually a conservative. Um, they were journalists at that time. So few things about Chamberlain. He was actually a war leader for a year. We always associate Churchill with World War II, but Chamberlain actually was the war leader for the first year that we were involved in World War II. And almost without question, the pressure of of that would have exacerbated his cancer, and almost certainly, I imagine the widespread ridicule, vitriol, and so on would have exacerbated his condition. Um, there's still very heated debate about Chamberlain and his role in history. Most historians, of course, say that it was a absolutely tragic error. But I think most people, there's a fine line between being incredibly naive, and I always think that Chamberlain maybe was a bit naive. For example, in the Munich Agreement, apparently Hitler was very rude and told him to hurry up and sign it. So Chamberlain probably should have sent something. But what people need to understand about the context of the time is this was still within living memory of the trenches. For that generation of European leaders, appeasement seemed not only natural, but necessary. And this is no way to excuse what Chamberlain had done, but I think we need to look at the context of the time. Um, So to this day, his name has become a byword for appeasement. Even in the film W about the Bush shears in the White House, there's a scene where I think it's Dick Cheney or Donald Rumsfeld is having a heated argument with Colin Powell, and they accuse him of being a Neville Chamberlain. Certainly today, some Republicans have accused Obama of being Chamberlain-esque. But his name has been used as an adjective, as a slur for appeasing evil. Um, it would be very difficult to not take this into account when assessing the Chamberlain premiership. That's unfortunate in some regards because I actually personally believe Chamberlain was probably a fairly decent man. But when you make that sort of error, when you're leading a country like Britain, it's a grave mistake. Um, so unfortunately for him, his name will always be tied to that situation. And it must be one of the biggest turnarounds in British political history to go from the immense popularity he had coming back from Munich to the widespread um, feelings of, well, Churchill was right. Um, Chamberlain has been featured, of course, in film numerous times. He was in, I believe, the film The King's Speech, and I think he played a role in The Gathering Storm, actually. I think that focused more on Baldwin. This was the biography of Churchill and his sort of wilderness years, standing out alone in Parliament and so on. There's one of the Conservative anti-Churchill MPs in that who says the trenches are still within living memory, and that sort of highlighted the way people felt at the time. So, what can't be forgotten is that Chamberlain was a very popular figure in his day until war broke out. And very often, the fate of politicians changes due to events. I think it was Churchill actually who said, "Events, dear boy, events." Churchill, of course, and I'll cover this more in the Churchill video, but he said, well, he was the opposite. He was extremely unpopular. He was seen as a warmonger, as a cranky old man, etc., etc. So it's very interesting how events can change someone's reputation. So that's 39th Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain.